I'm the managing director for Checkmark, which is part of Nestle Purina. My job entails creating communications on behalf of the brands at Nestle Purina.
Okay.
In general, it's vitally important because there's a number of different options that consumers have to choose for their pet food choices, so it's important to be top of mind for most of our brands. We use what's called a creative brief, which details what the objective of the advertising or the communications is, what the primary message should be, what are some of the support points for that, what's the tone of the brand. Those are the types of things that we need to start that. Breeds depend on the brand that we're advertising. So for example, we have one brand, which is our flagship brand, which is called Purina Pro Plan, and that is really targeted toward people who are professionals, breeders. We use a lot of, that brand specifically is fed by a lot of the winners of dog competitions like Westminster. So for that brand, we use only purebred dogs. Then you've got on the other spectrum, Alpo, which is one of our value brands, and there we're trying to appeal to kind of the everyday dog user, and so there we're using not purebred dogs, we're using kind of just every dog. And then there are other brands like Fancy Feast, which is a specific cat food, and there we've built a whole brand around that sort of breed of cat food, or breed of cat owner, which is the white cat appears in all of our communications for Fancy Feast. So thinking again about Alpo as an example, that is a brand that really doesn't require much advertising, because the return that we get on our advertising for that brand is not very significant, because the competitors aren't, the primary competitors for Alpo also are not advertising, and the decision the consumer is making is not generally based on advertising, it's based on other dimensions like price or product or availability. So their advertising doesn't play much of a role.
Okay.
For example, Iams, one of the brands that competes directly with Iams is Purina One. So there what we're trying to do is set ourselves apart from Iams, and so some of the similarities, the points of parity that we have with Iams are we both have real meat as the first ingredient of our food. But for example, on Purina One, a differentiator that we might have is the fact that our product also contains a meaty piece in it, which is different from Iams. The other thing is we might also focus on other benefits, like for Purina One we have an advertising campaign centered around the 28-day challenge, which tells consumers that if you try this product for 28 days, no matter what you were feeding before, you're going to see these specific differences in your animal after 28 days.
Okay.
We do consider it. It's one of the aspects. I think the primary thing we focus on is what the consumer need is, and then after that we're looking at what is the competitive set and what are the competitors likely to do, how much are they spending, where are they spending, to ensure that we are creating a differentiated point of view, or are differentiating ourselves in terms of how we're reaching consumers or how much we're reaching consumers. Primarily on a schedule, so again it's based on what are we trying to achieve and what's the right way to achieve that, but then we take into consideration if we know that a company is dropping a coupon or an FSI in a Sunday paper, we might choose to heavy up in response to that. Or if we have intelligence that says a brand is going to be launching a competitive brand is going to be launching in June, well, that might require us to do increased spending in advance of June so we can get consumers out purchasing our product, so then they won't have a need for the competitor's product in June. Purina One, using that as an example again, the 28-day challenge. So a number of our competitors like Iams will use traditional advertising like television or print. So the 28-day challenge became highly successful for us because it used a different media. It used radio, and it used a specific type of radio called endorsement radio. So as you're listening to a radio station, which probably people don't listen to that as much as they used to, but what a type of advertisement that you might hear is called endorsement radio. And that's when the DJ just starts talking about a product experience that they've had. And you can actually pay for them to talk about your product experience, and that would be how we were able to deliver a unique advertising experience for Purina One, because we used that media and had radio DJs talk about Purina One. We would send them the product, get them to use it with their pet, and then they would talk about that experience on the radio. So that gave us a differentiated advertising experience versus IMES, because they weren't on the radio. So even though our spending might not have been as high overall from an advertising budget, we were really owning people who were listening to the radio and listening during drive times, and also hearing it from somebody that they felt was a little bit more trusted and credible than just the advertiser saying it.
That's awesome.
What IMES has done in response to that has been to try and copy the program,
Okay.
but not necessarily using radio endorsement, but they've taken this idea of not the 28-day challenge specifically, but talking about specific benefits that you would see from switching, and try to put that into some of the media that they have. Yeah, it happens probably more in promotional advertising than it does in kind of awareness-based advertising. So again, using the example of when we know a brand's going to launch, and couponing and trialing is a big marketing tool that both will use. So one will try and immediately copy the other. So if we run a coupon on a Sunday thing, probably the other brand will try and run one similarly to try and get that same sort of volume from consumers. So when you're buying food in a wet can, you're buying that in a certain amount of frequency. So there you're getting a lot of, okay, well, if they've done this, we've got to up our spend and try and get people to purchase more. So give them a deal on 8 cans for $1, or buy 2 get 1 free kind of thing. It depends really on the brand that we're trying to market, because some brands like an Alpo are more responsive to promotional advertising, whereas others, people are making their decision less based on price communication, but more based on, okay, I'm looking for that highest quality, so I need really a deeper level of information on things. So that's really how we are trying to make the decision about what sort of promotional spend do we have versus kind of awareness spend or information. There's not really a correct answer to that, because it depends on who it is you're trying to reach. So what I will say is that in media right now, you're seeing a shift from 50 years ago, the importance of newspaper advertising, to today, the importance of digital advertising, because consumers' media habits have shifted, where they're taking in information in different ways than they were historically. So digital advertising is taking on a more important role in the marketing mix than it was even 5 or 10 years ago. And television will probably continue to play a significant role, but its role has diminished somewhat too, as people's viewing patterns have been fragmented, and there's things like YouTube and other things that are competing for that attention. I think pet food is a really interesting category from an economic standpoint, because there are a number of trends that we look at in terms of households owning pets, size of pets. All of those things contribute to how we forecast for what the demand is going to be for our products. And then we also take into account the competitors that we have and what's happening with those, because we can look at not only what our unit sales are, but what our pound sales are and what our dollar sales are. And I think what we've seen is dollar sales continue to go up, and that's not due to people buying more or a higher quantity, but it's because the price that we're charging now is higher because consumers are willing to pay for a higher quality of pet food than they were historically. So it's a really fascinating category to be in. We're also seeing things like how, pet ownership is relatively stable. It had decreased a few years ago during the recession. Now it's kind of not really growing significantly, but where it is growing, it tends to be with smaller pets, which obviously impacts our business a lot because that means smaller pets, smaller stomachs, eating less. So we really need to figure out a way to continue to maximize our revenue and profits. So that means how can we create products that can still do that, knowing that the size of the pet has gotten smaller.